Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. I am thrilled today to have our special guest, Ben Lytle, who I've just found out was a Texas ranch kid. So we share our Texas heritage together. Anyway, Ben's bigger achievements in life are that he's a former chair and CEO of Anthem Healthcare, which has a current market value of more than $100 billion, if my research is right. But importantly for today, he's the author of a new book, The Potentialist. So just so you have a visual, as you know, I don't interview a lot of authors, but this book really caught my attention. So looking forward to hearing more about it. So the main theme here is what I took away when I read it is that we have a lot of accelerating change, democratization, and deinstitutionalization coming in our lives the next 30 years, even greater than what we've had in the past. And these is not about doom and gloom, but it presents us with opportunities. So let me bring you forward. There we are. Thanks, Ben, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Karen. And you captured exactly what the book's about. That was probably the best summary, best 30-second summary I've ever heard. So it
Oh,
was great.
terrific. Well, thank you. So, congratulations again on this book. I know that you have a background in information technology and that sort of working your way from just an IT guy, right, to be a CIO, then a COO, and then a CEO. And I'm
Right.
just wondering how that background sort of informed your progression. You know, I'm super interested in leadership.
Right.
So I think, but right before we switch to the book, I'd love to hear a little bit about how that background supported you as you progressed into the C suite.
Yeah, I think there are really almost three converging paths. Convergence is one of the big secrets, by the way,
Mm,
of futures. Is you don't follow trends, you follow convergence.
mm,
And convergence in my life really shaped my leadership. The first was being in IT at the time I was starting in 1964, when computers were really first and second generation. It wasn't a barrier to overcome because you were young. Everybody was young. The
mhm,
big boss at the aerospace company I worked at and really moved up fast in IT was a whopping 27 years old, and so for him, it was not a stretch for him to promote me to be a supervisor over 60 people when I was 21.
mhm,
So that helped a lot because being young was not a barrier for me at the time I was in IT. It gave, it was so important, and it was, by the time I became a CIO, it was really important to a lot of industries. It was crucial, and so you were not only sitting at the table as one of the senior leaders, even though you're young, probably usually 20 years younger than everybody at the table,
mhm,
but you also had a huge responsibility in these companies, and that really helped my career. The second big shaping effect was through a mentor of mine. I decided to go to law school instead of getting an MBA. And his
mhm.
argument to me is, you already know a lot about business, but law is so important in how you think about the way business and society is structured. It was one of the best things that ever happened. And literally, Anthem wouldn't exist, I don't think, if I wouldn't have been a lawyer, because I figured out in that highly regulated environment how to merge
Mhm.
mutual insurance companies, which didn't require any capital because we didn't have any, and to work through a regulatory process, a complex regulatory process. So that the law was the second, and the third was being a potentialist, because when I was 20 in college, a charismatic young professor said to us in our very first day of this class, you do not have to be what other people want you to be. You shouldn't do what other people want you to be. You should discover who you are, what you love, what makes your life fulfilled, and you pursue that. You have to discover that and then follow that. And
Mm.
if you do that, living to your potential is true measure of success, not how much money you have, how much power you have. Those are things that may come with it. But if you follow really great people, they're chasing their own potential. And that
Yeah,
so those three combined, and it really shaped everything, including my leadership style
yeah,
and my
that's
entrepreneurial
terrific.
game.
Yeah. I'll just say briefly, not dissimilar from my career. I was a very early employee and part of the leadership team at Compact Computer, who you might remember.
Sure, very well.
And yeah, you know, we were at 25 running $50 million budgets and just managing global teams. And that was it's not that that's so striking today, but it was striking at the time because it's not how things have been done before.
That's
So
right.
pretty
It took
amazing.
a long time to work up those corporate ranks
Exactly.
before IT came in.
Yeah. So that was a big change that happened in our world anyway. So in this book, again, you talk about sort of opportunities, but you start by laying some groundwork about the new realities that are here or will be here in the next 30 years. And just to summarize, so there will be changes in how we work, changes in our lifestyle possibilities, we'll live longer, and how we integrate with automation. Those are the three big takeaways for me. I want to talk a little bit about how we work, because
Mhm.
that I know is a subject that will be of interest to the people who are watching and listening. You say that we should all think like entrepreneurs. So, what is it about entrepreneurial thinking that you think will help us with the changes that are coming?
Well, it's going to sound, and of course, all we can do in a short period of time here. I do a whole program on what it means to be an entrepreneur because I know I've associated myself with good entrepreneurs, and I think
Hmm.
I'm a good entrepreneur in my track record. And you can be an entrepreneur inside a corporation, a big company, and you can be an entrepreneur with a startup. A lot of people think of startups, and they're really one and the same in some ways. Probably one of the most important thing is looking at life, business, your career through a lens of opportunity, through a lens of what something could be, through a lens of potential. And that really goes at sort of a core of whether you tend to be pessimistic about life and the future or you tend to be optimistic.
Mm.
When you're pessimistic, you'll look right past opportunity. I've seen it happen over and over again. And when you're an entrepreneur, the first thing you have to do very often is confront people who are by their nature pessimistic
Mm.
and can't see what you literally cannot see what you see. And so that takes a certain amount of courage and confidence in yourself that, okay, I see this and it's worth exploring. So I think that's one of the core attitudes about thinking like an entrepreneur. And the other is acting,
Mm.
starting down the path. True story, Ken. Over the years, I can't even count the number of people who come to me and said, "Hey, I've got an idea. I'd like to talk to you about a business." And I literally almost always say yes. I say, "Sure, tell me a little bit about it," and then we'll talk for a while, maybe have a meeting, and then I'll say at the end, I'll say, "Okay, take that idea and go back and write 10 bullet points down."
Hmm.
That would break it down to the next level of detail from what you got right now. Honestly, 90% never come back.
Mm. Yeah, just that inability to go to the
Just,
to
okay, I
reality. Yeah.
idea. Now, as you know, you have to act. You have to
Yeah.
ultimately act. And for people to think, well, I've got a job and I'm going to have time. You can do this part time. I've worked with people who have built an entire business plan, a business thesis, and built the thesis out and not quite a plan yet, but a good argument for their idea and done it completely part time, just on their extra time.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage people to act. We're entering probably, with no question, we're entering the greatest period for entrepreneurs ever, and there's just going to be more tools to work with and fewer barriers. So I hope people will give it a try.
Yeah. Tools and capital. So
Right.
those things are coming. Yeah.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the realities that you put forward is that this revolution, I think, in terms of how we integrate with automation. And
Right.
I'm with you, right? We talk about unplugging when we go on vacation. And, I have my Aura ring and I just got my new
Oh,
upgraded
good for
Apple Watch
you.
yesterday. So, all this quantification of life is goodness for me. Um, but two of my concerns about this integration with automation, one is over reliance on technology. And a minor example of that would be like today, just internet outages, right? How impactful that is. And then, secondly, concerns about privacy. So, how do you address those as we become more and more integrated in the future?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you're concerned because that keeps you aware. And I think if you look back to from the internet when it first became publicly available in 1991, and you look at that, smartphones, everything else, we've been a bit naive in how quick we we adopted automation without saying, okay, what could come with this I don't like? And there will always be something that comes with it, always. Because as I explain in the book, adversity and resistance with every advancement automatically comes adversity and resistance. And
Yeah.
the purpose of that is it's a quality control system for nature. It says, hey, you didn't quite get it right. Go fix it before you go ahead. So, and that's a good thing. But I'm glad you pay attention to it. And I hope everybody will be more careful going forward. On security, and I'll put one caveat to this, and that's quantum computers. I think if you talk to people about Web3 design right now, what people are thinking about with blockchain, but even more advanced than blockchain, serverless computing, distributed computing, people are starting to figure out how we build a much more secure environment. And then the other is us owning the data. We made an unconscious, most people unconscious deal with the Googles and the Facebook of the world. Oh, it's free. Okay, boom. We quit thinking at that point. We didn't stop to say, what does that contract say? That contract says I can have my data used any way I want it. They want to use it. I don't think we'd make the same deal today.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the kind of wiser approach to automation in the future, particularly as it becomes more seamless. You really have to think through now exactly what am I signing up for here and exactly what is the deal. And so I think those are super important. And I think that on plugging, what I like to think about, even when the ultimate that I talk about in the book, which is, according to Ray Kurzweil and a lot of other very smart people, it's coming in probably the next 10 to 15 years, where we'll be able to basically connect our brain to the cloud. And it's a good way to think about it. And it's essentially, if you go back to the time I was in computing or when you were first around it, one thing that hasn't changed, we have the most powerful computer in the world between our ears. People, scientists even yet don't understand its capacity and how it works. And on the other side, through, certainly Web3 and through the cloud, we basically have almost virtually unlimited computing power on the other side. So here's these powerful brains. And the way we still are connected, and it hadn't changed since I became an IT guy in 1964, is keyboard and a screen.
Yep.
We still have to use it. So it's how fast can I type and how fast can I read a screen? And that's kind of crazy in a way. It's kind of a barrier. You go, wow. And that barrier also causes exclusion, and particularly in undeveloped countries, less developed countries, to the very power of these computers. So that's going to move away. And at some point, we will be able to have some device. I don't think any of us are going to sign on to have a chip put in our head, but we're going to have some way, some device, maybe an earpiece behind our ear, very similar to what we can do with a smartphone, but now it's thought activated or voice activated. So the real thing there is when we start to do that, you need to think, do I have an off button? Do I have a mute button? Can I control this two-way relationship? And really be thoughtful about it. I think hopefully people will be, because it frightens them a little. So, but hopefully we'll do that, and designers will give us those capabilities.
Of course, it'll be the age of user interface, right? It's the UIX age. So
that's a game changer. I mean, if you just start pondering it, that's a game changer for humanity.
Terrific. So these possibilities, as I read through the book, were pretty exciting to me. We're living on those of us that spend most of our time immersed in tech today. We're seeing, I think, sort of the early age of these things. And it's pretty exciting. And I think there are possibilities, especially for people like us who I think of as having won the birth lottery. So we were born in a time and a place where we have access to all this. You talk a lot about democratization in your book. So I'd love to hear you talk about how we democratize these possibilities. For example, avoiding some sort of digital divide getting even greater than it is today in the future.
Well, I think we just talked about one of the biggest ways is when people don't have to have any skill whatsoever. That was what Steve Jobs tried to, advanced automation,
Mhm.
maybe more than anyone, in creating an intuitive devices. And now it even moves past device to where it's intuitive usage. And so how do we use this incredible power? What I think a good way to think about what the kind of huge game changers could be, and I think it's coming.
Mhm.
Pay attention to the words here and kind of savor them a little bit. Imagine the leveling capability. In other words, the ability to lift humanity as a whole. If we had global, bespoke, lifelong learning.
Mm.
Think about
Yeah.
that. Where it was global means, we've already got about 4.5 billion smartphones out there, moving to 5 out of 7.5 billion people. We've already got internet access to, around 5 billion. It'll be up late, I think within 10 years, probably everybody figures everyone's going to have it. Now, what could you do with that? Well, what if you could build lifelong learning? Not education as we think about it today, but the ability to learn almost anything you want to learn, and it could be in the way you learn. Everybody's got different circadian rhythms. Everybody has starts from a different baseline of what we know and don't know.
Mhm.
Imagine how that changes the game from what we do today, where we think of education something we do when we're young, and then we don't really, it's harder to pursue it after you get older. Now it becomes an experience. It becomes something I can almost do on demand
Mhm.
and learn. We somewhat do it with Google searches today, but now advance that hugely to where it knows exactly what I'm looking for. So I don't have to go through the search process, and it knows exactly how I learn. That is the possibility. That's one of the real game changers in the
Mm.
future. And of
Yeah.
course, my favorite, and what's the cover of the book, is in that same process, you can teach the capacity for wisdom. Right.
Yeah.
You
It's
can
great.
teach the capacity for wisdom, because information and knowledge are becoming a commodity. How to use it well is the next big step for humanity. And how do we make that? We make that happen. And it can be taught. The capacity for wisdom can be taught. The Greeks knew how to do it very well 2,500 years ago. We now have to use the very automations that are changing the world to democratize wisdom. That's
Mm.
an incredibly powerful idea, but I think it's absolutely real. And it's why I'm committing these years when I could be over in Italy with my Italian friends. That's why I'm doing all this, is to help everybody see that possibility and to make it a reality if I possibly can. That's what my book series is all about.
Just about. That's great. Yeah, so I spoke recently with the CEO of Emeritus and that company and others who are really all about democratizing education. And so definitely a big wave coming our way and becoming more and more
Well,
ubiquitous.
literally part of what I'm doing is trying to change the narrative.
Mhm.
Forget education. Think of lifelong learning. We're going to live longer, go through many more careers, jobs, life experiences. Change the model. Move from education to lifelong learning, and then think about how it becomes bespoke and
Mhm.
global.
Sure.
We do
Yeah,
that, it's a game changer. But it does require a different mindset than thinking of education something we do when we're young.
absolutely. Yeah, it's not something you get a degree in and you're done.
Right.
It's definitely, I
Especially
think,
when we
I think professionals today who are successful, and you're a really good example of this, but professionals today who are successful continue to learn, and maybe curiosity,
yeah.
which is
Well,
a big,
one of the things that's one of the greatest opportunities, when I speak to people and I say, what if the world were wiser? What if we were just wise? First of all, think of wisdom as the highest human achievement, because
Mhm.
it incorporates so many other things we want human beings to be. Just one thing in the aging of population could have an enormous effect. As we live longer, as life expectancy expands, each stage of life expands. We can all witness it right now. Kids grow up younger, they get married later, they have kids later. But one of the stages that expands is the age of when I think people are at their peak maturity and wisdom. And today that would probably be around 45 to 70, something like that, where you still have a lot of energy, you think very young. Now that stage is going to stretch and be longer. Imagine that we have people with 40 years at their best. Wow. Just that in and of itself will have a huge impact. And in an aging society, there'll be a bigger percentage of the total population. That could have a profound effect in and of itself. And if we really pay attention to it and we accelerate the learning how to be wise and how to make better decisions to younger people, we'll get even more years of people at that peak. And so that's very exciting to me.
Yeah,
and one of the reasons I'm so optimistic.
Of course. So it sounds like continuing to educate, to learn as we go through life is how we prepare ourselves sort of to catch this next S curve, right? That comes
Absolutely.
from stage to stage.
Be at your best at the time there's the greatest opportunity.
Yes, completely agree. And then we have to cultivate, I think, a culture that respects the wisdom. I think we have a lot of wisdom today that we have blinders on about. So,
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot already out there that you can learn from, but there are some good signs. One of the biggest things searched on the internet are quotes, and quotes are encapsulated wisdom.
mm,
So people are hungry for it. They're thirsty for it. There's no source today. There's not
yeah,
very many sources. And our institutions, as they sort of go through this deinstitutionalization phase, they no longer carry the weight they did, and they don't have the wisdom of those. Some of those folks that are leaders they don't express wisdom very much.
yeah.
They express advocacy, which is the opposite of wisdom.
Agreed. So I have to ask, do you have a favorite quote? There are a number of quotes sprinkled in your book, but is there one quote
Yeah,
that means most to
that's a
you?
challenge. Yeah, a couple I don't mind sharing. One is, and I don't. It's a little bit of a long quote, so I don't think I can get it exactly right. But it's in the book, and it really defines today. As you know, Alvin Toffler, the guy that wrote
Mhm.
Future Shots, was a mentor of mine in some ways and a hero of mine in some ways. And he really called it. If you would go back and read that book today, he describes exactly what's going on. But he essentially said that those who are successful in the 21st century the illiterate of the 21st century will not be the people who can't read and write, but those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because that he's expressing that very thing that we now see as a reality as life expectancy expands. Another one, because I think it's so profound, is by a guy named Eli Dohan. And he says, enlightenment is simply intimacy with all things.
Mm.
And that one, ponder on that one for a while. It's pretty profound. So it's really staying related, staying connected to the world, this beautiful, incredible world and universe we live in. And that's, if you start with that every day, you're probably going to have a good, happy day.
Yeah. Well, as a longtime practitioner of Zen, that's it. That's exactly it. So beautifully said. Are there any major takeaways from the book that we haven't discussed yet that you'd like to briefly highlight as our time comes to a close?
I think the thing I would encourage everyone out there to become an activist in this, or proactive. Uh, it's the thing that will cause us to have this baby that I talk about in there is coming one way or the other. It's
Mhm.
coming. It's up to us whether that birthing process is going to be really, really painful, or whether it's going to come smoother and easy. And the barriers to that are fear and pessimism. And so fear makes you make bad decisions. Pessimism causes you not to see good opportunity. And unfortunately, in a recent national poll, 70% of the people said the future was going to be worse instead of better.
Mhm.
And that's sad. That is, first of all, it's wrong. And secondly, it indicates how uninformed people are about the potential of the future. We could break through all the limits we've ever thought about in human potential. Like you said, the birth lottery. We will break through that for the first time in history. My gosh, what an opportunity. So I would encourage people to talk about our life. It really can be a great deal better. Will we all have challenges and adversity? Yes, always. Will we always have some people who believe that the end of the world is just around the corner? Always, because that speaks to who they are, not the reality necessarily. And so there's no guarantees, but the better argument is we're in for a better world. Let's make it happen faster by, first of all, being pragmatically optimist.
Yeah. Love the combination of those two words. So thank you so much, Ben, for your time today. Again, we've been talking with Ben Lytle, who is currently the author of The Potentialist, in addition to a lengthy and successful resume. And this is the first of 3 books that Ben has planned on the topic. And I think once you read the first, you will be in line for the second and third, as I am. So thanks again for joining us, and take good care, Ben.
Thank you. You too, Karen. Bye-bye.